My name is Kris Hudson, and I joined the League in 1970 when right before my son was born. And he and my daughter grew up in the League, and I became a board member of the Portland League soon after. I guess it was about when Eric was 3 or 4 years old, and so that entailed more meetings, but there were a lot of us who had young children, and so the children came to the meetings and they would play in one room while we met in another room or something. And when my daughter was, I think in the 2nd grade, I was Portland's president, which was an interesting time. And the one big thing that happened while I was president was brought back to me this morning as in our workshop for the legislative day, that there was a reapportionment, and in Portland my district was left without a senator. And we decided that really wasn't quite right. And so we decided that we should enter into a lawsuit against the state. And one of the members of the board, her husband was an attorney, and he found us somebody who would work for pro bono, and he had never done anything before the Supreme Court, so he was absolutely thrilled to take the case, and none of us knew anything that we were doing, but we managed to do it, and we won, and it was a very exciting time, and it certainly made a lot of headlines for the League and good news. And after I was president, I was absolutely exhausted, and it was time, I thought, for a rest, and my kids were still in elementary school. But the new state president was a high school friend of mine from Seattle. And there was also another local league president who had gone to the same high school. So when we all connected at the state convention, it was quite interesting. But Linda convinced me that I should come on the state board as an appointed chair. And so I finally broke down and did that. Well, within 6 months of her becoming president and my coming on the board, her husband was transferred. And I don't know how many people, I mean, they had to have started with the vice president and gone on down the list. Well, anyway, lowly little Kris ended up as president, and it was the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. And I think the way the League was run at that time probably showed some of that too, because we were not really actively engaged in the state as we should have been. But nobody stepped forward to take on the responsibility. So we kept the League afloat and kept things going, and then during the legislative session we did have chairs and we worked some, but we sure didn't have the presence that we had had in previous years. And so when it came time for nominations, I thought, oh, I don't think I can go on, but there wasn't anybody who really stepped up, and so I said, okay, we've got to make this work. And so I decided that we were going to become a very active league, and every single person on the board had to do be responsible for what their title said they were, and we would become very involved and active. And so some people had agreed to be on the board because they thought it was just the title, and they liked the name and the prestige that went along with the title. And I sent a letter out to everybody who had accepted and told them what I was expecting in my 2nd term. And so I got several resignations immediately, so the nominating committee had more of a job to do, but we had an excellent board. And we decided that if we were going to really have a presence in the legislature, that we needed to have a paid lobbyist or someone to get all the information for us. Because, I mean, this is in the days when computers were just starting to be used. And so everything you had to get through the mail room, and nothing was mailed out. You had to go physically and pick it up. And so I think we called her a lobbyist. She would go in all the time, and it was Norma Jean Germond, a former state president, who we hired, and marvelous person. And so she got all of the information and distributed it to all of the action chairs, and everybody knew who the League of Women Voters was again, so that was good. But in mentioning that, it was just the start of the computer age. And when I first became president, Pat LaRocque was the office administrator, and she and her husband had lived in the Salem area forever and had a hazelnut farm. And so to run the business, they bought a computer, and she had put all the members' names on the computer. So she was able to generate a mailing list for everybody. So we used that to send out the bulletins and the newsletters and information to the state president or to the local league presidents and things. But that was all we used the computer for, because we didn't have a printer in the office. She had that at her home. So every letter that we wrote to the legislature had to be typed. So, 30 or 60 letters to every single member of the House or the Senate was just ridiculous. And I said, we can't keep doing this. This is a tremendous waste of time. And my typing, I'd have to do 3 letters to get one. Pat was pretty good, and that was in the days of whiteout and all that kind of stuff, but still. So we did finally buy a computer and a printer so we could start using that, but there was no email, so the only way you could contact people was either by mail or phone, and long distance rates in those times was still rather high. I visited 2 friends in Seattle, and they both mentioned on this one trip that they thought I would be very interested in the League of Women Voters. So when I came back, I decided, okay, Kris, be brave, because I was a very shy person. Nobody would believe me today, but I was. And I called the Portland office and asked, and of course, I got the royal treatment and was sent information, and I joined, and I'll never forget my first unit meeting at a woman's house, Mildred Taxer, who lived just up the street from me. And oh, she was just so welcoming, and the women in the group, I just thought, oh, they're so well educated and so brilliant. And one of them was the state president, and others had been very active in the league, but also in other organizations. And they made me feel right at home and not embarrassed about anything. When I opened my mouth, they didn't say, oh, that's dumb. So it was just great, and I have grown so much in the league. I think I've gotten to do so many different things. Travel to, as the local league president, just coming to Salem was a big thing. I was tied at home with kids, and then being state president, traveling all over the state. The last year that I was president, the National League had a program where they had been given a lot of money through, and I don't even remember the foundation now, to help with leadership training. And so Sharon Little, who succeeded me as president, and Colleen Bennett, who was the next president, and I went to Dallas for training. And we had to come up with a program, and as we headed down, we decided we were going to emphasize membership. Well, they told us membership wasn't a program, that we couldn't do that. Well, we wanted something to attract members. And school funding was a problem in the state 20 years ago, 30 years ago, as it is today. And so we decided we would do something on school funding. And that weekend there were, I think there were more than 20 of us attending this meeting, probably 7 to 10 leagues. And then they had, I think, 7 or 8 people from the national staff and some experts that were brought in to help us prepare this plan. And it just turned out to be marvelous. It became the school's project that we did, and we created a program that we took around the state to talk about how schools were funded and how inadequate and how unfair the funding was. In some cities or communities, they had the wherewithal, and so they funded their schools well. This was before Measure 5. And others, whether they had money or not, they chose not to spend it on schools. And so you really had an inequity. You had the highly funded schools, and there was in testing and everything else, it showed up as to who got the money and who didn't. So we took it around the program and we hired some consultants. We raised money, and I luckily was hired as the director of the school's project, which, you know, you're not supposed to use your board position to gain employment, but I was no longer on the board, and they decided since I'd helped create the program, I was probably the best person to do it. So, and that was a lot of work too, but it was fun. And we hired Kogan and Associates to be our consultants and to help us, and we designed a slide program, because that was in the days when you did slideshows. And we took it around to 23 communities, explaining the background of how schools are funded and the tax system. And then we asked them what values that they wanted to see in a school system and in state funding, or in how they envisioned funding, but not talking about numbers or anything. We put all that information together, and then in the spring I went out again, Elaine and me, and hit the same 23 communities, and then we had them build a tax system for funding, and we told them how many millions of dollars or billions of dollars we needed, millions I think it was, and how much you could expect to get from each one of these taxes. So from the cigarette tax you could get, and from the alcohol tax you could get this much, and from income tax you get it this much. And so they had to build their own tax system, and it was absolutely fascinating to watch that everybody did it, but they sat at round tables, and so first of all they built their own little plan, and then they discussed it, and then we all discussed it in the open meeting with everybody. But some people, they wanted to do it with all the bitty little taxes. Well, they only got a quarter of the way up, and they're, oh, we need to do something big. And so out of that came, some people definitely felt that we needed to have a sales tax too, but others wouldn't touch it. And we've seen throughout the history in the state that there are more people who won't touch that idea than who will. But it was a very interesting exercise, and we put the results together and had it finished before the end of the legislative session. And so Sharon presented all that information to the legislature. And then Barbara Roberts became governor after that, and she had her series of tax discussions around the state, and she modeled that series after what we had done. So we felt that so doors were opened because of my league work. And then when I was on the National League, we were all assigned different state leagues to be responsible for, and so I got to fly around and visit different states and attend their state conventions and things, and that was all very interesting too. So it's been a very enjoyable time. A lot of work, but I made so many friends and learned so much.